You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.
Broadcasting live from the Capital OTB studios, this is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
Good morning. Welcome to Racing Across America on this Sunday morning. Seth Merrow in the studio. Thanks, as always, for joining us. A little bit later on, we will be joined by our friend Bob Ehalt. We had Tim Wilkin on yesterday. He was at the Breeders' Cup last weekend covering the action for the Blood Horse, as was Bob Ehalt. So I thought we'd get one more discussion in, recap thoughts of last weekend's Breeders' Cup action. Reached out to Drew Coatney, and maybe we'll get him next week because he was traveling today. But I mentioned him yesterday on the Handicappers Report. He won the BCBC, the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, which it's a big money, live money contest. You pay $10,000 to enter. I think $2,000, $2,500 maybe go into the prize pool. And then you play live with $7,500. And Drew wound up with $130,000. But he made a huge. He had $90,000 going into the Classic and put it all to win on Flightline and wound up winning the contest. And so he collected over $500,000, I think, between what he made with his bankroll and the prize money. And from what I read, he's not a veteran contest player. He's fairly new to the game. He does some work with Pete Fornatal and the In the Money media podcast group, and has been a racing fan relatively shortly, I think. So I tried to get Drew. I'd love to just talk to him about the contest and kind of what got him into the game and what got him into the contest. And, reading the article of America's Best Racing, I think it was also in Blood Horse, it said, I'm going to pay the money and you get a nice VIP experience. I'll bring my wife. We'll go to the Breeders' Cup and, I'll see what I can do with the contest. And he ends up walking away winning. And from what I subsequently read, he's also planning to buy a house with his winnings. So pretty good weekend at the Breeders' Cup for Drew Coatney. As I say, maybe we'll get him on next week because I'd love to hear just the background story and the strategy of the contest and whatnot. I mentioned Pete Fornatal, and yesterday when I was doing the OTB Live, the handicapping in the afternoon, there was a horse, Looms Boldy, that went out for Marshall Graham and 10 Strike Racing, I think in the first race at Aqueduct, early at Aqueduct. And I said, geez, I wonder if that's, I wonder if they named it after Pete Fornatal, because his Twitter handle is @LoomisBoldly. And subsequently on Twitter, Pete was showing pictures of himself because he was at Aqueduct yesterday to see the horse, and I believe he's in the winner's circle after Looms Boldly won. So sure enough, the Looms Boldly referring to Pete. And our friend Steve Bick has a horse named after him, Bick, and that horse won the other night. I'm trying to think where. Somewhere in the Mid-Atlantic region. The horse named Bick won as well. So some of the folks who are, fairly regular on our show came up with horses named after them, having won some races within the past week. Yesterday, stakes-wise, it was a fun day because it was the Claiming Crown down at Churchill. I felt bad for the people who shot for the Claiming Crown on the grass because there was no grass racing yesterday at Churchill, not because of the condition of the turf course, which has been a little bit of a problem, or maybe more than a little bit of a problem down there, but it snowed yesterday morning down at Churchill, which meant all the races on the turf got moved to the main track, which is, again, unfortunate if you're thinking, hey, we're going to go to the claiming ground and take a little pop with a horse on the grass, and then you know the opportunity fell away because you don't get those opportunities a lot with the claiming level of racing. But otherwise, it was a fun day. Again, there were starter allowances, name starter allowances. But on the stake side of things, you're not really looking at these horses going forward in stakes. They're claiming or starter allowance type horses. So, I didn't really pull up any of those. The grass stake that was scheduled for yesterday at Aqueduct was moved to today because they expected some weather, and sure enough, there was some wet weather, that affected the track in New York yesterday. So that was a good move. So there are a couple of turf stakes scheduled for today down in New York. And again, that meant no stake yesterday, given that they juggled things up a little bit. So it was kind of quiet. I did pull up the actual stakes results from yesterday, and I didn't call for any replays. I do have a couple of replays from a week ago, last Sunday, because there were two-year-old races in New York. But otherwise, the Best Arabian up in Woodbine, Live Oak and Mark Cassie won that with our Flash Drive. There was also a couple of two-year-old stakes. I probably should have pulled up those, but a couple of two-year-old stakes down at Laurel. The Smart Halo, Twice as Sweet, one for Brendan Walsh and Godolphin. Maybe keep your eyes on that one. And the James Lewis on the boys' side, Recruiter, one for Kathleen Lynch. So there was a couple of, interesting stakes. Out at Del Mar, it was the Catherine Crosby Bipartisanship, got it done for Graham Motion out there, who I read earlier is going to have a little bit of a presence out at Del Mar for this fall meet. Graham Motion, I'm speaking of. But otherwise, as I say, I pulled up a couple of stakes from last Sunday because obviously we don't get to recap the Sunday stakes when we're in here doing the Sunday morning show. But this time of year, as I kind of alluded to when I talked about those two stakes at Laurel, always kind of fun to watch and pay attention to two-year-old stakes at this time of year because it leads into a month and a half away, the three-year-old season. And last weekend we had a stake for the two-year-old boys and a stake for the two-year-old girls. And on the Philly side of things, it was the Tempted last week. We're going to watch the stretch run, and it will be number 4, Good Sam, under Irod Ortiz, getting it done for trainer Chad Brown and Peter Brandt. The chart margin here is going to be 3.5, and getting it done as the 3-5 favorite. Foggy Night second, and Rosie's Alibi runs third. But as you can see here, pretty solid victory, the 3.5, and geared down a little bit. It looked like maybe at the end, but Good Sam got it done. Second start, second win, debuted back in early October at the Belmont at Aqueduct meet and won that day off by over 4 lengths. Went off for 4-1 that day. Got a little price for a Chad Brown, Peter Brandt runner, but now 2 for 2. They paid $300,000 for this horse last year, Keeneland Fall, and has proven to be worth the price. 2 for 2. So maybe a nice little 2-year-old filly moving forward to keep our eyes on as the 3-year-old scene approaches and the calendar turns, and on the 3-year-old filly scene, again, Good Sam may be worth paying attention to a little bit. On the boys' side, will we have one that will be worth watching going forward? Well, the Nashua was last Sunday at Aqueduct, and the winner there was number 4, Champion's Dream. Full Moon Madness, the number 1 second, and Prove Right runs third. Champion's Dream had won the career debut up at Saratoga for Danny Gargan, and then they got ambitious and moved into the Champagne. That's a tough ask in start number 2, and was well beaten in the Champagne. So drops back down to the grade 3 Nashua. And you can see here a nice grinding kind of stretch run to get it done late. And again, chart margin 3/4 of a length over Full Moon Madness. Full Moon Madness was the favorite, just barely. $1.30 to the dollar. versus $1.35 to the dollar for Champion's Dream. So the betting public had those two pretty close, and it turned out that way. But it was a nice, 2-year-old this time of year to get that nice grinding kind of win. Again, it'll be interesting to see this horse. Anytime they can win a debut up at Saratoga, that's certainly worth paying attention to, but did falter in the Grade 1 Champagne. So what level will we have on this? I'm kind of not going to hold that Champagne against, because again, that's a tall ask. You win the debut effort and then go right into a Grade 1, but comes back now 2 for 3 overall in the career, including a graded stakes race. So it'll be interesting to see Champion's Dream going forward. A son of Justify. They purchased this one, March Ocala, this year for $425,000. You have to think with, as I say, 2 for 3, debut win up at Saratoga, and a graded stakes win already. I would think they have to be pretty happy with the results of their purchase. Speaking of purchases, we talked about the sale on Monday. There were a couple of sales, as there are every year, right after the Breeders' Cup. There was a Fasig-Tipton sale on Sunday, the day after the Breeders' Cup, and then Monday kicked off November Keeneland. And Monday, we talked about it yesterday with Terry Finley. Monday was the sale of the 2.5% share in Flightline that went for $4.6 million. And again, we showed the video of that yesterday, the video of the sales pavilion, which was jam-packed. I mean, if you go up to, every year I'm at the sale at Saratoga, and even when there's a horse in the ring that is going to attract a lot of attention, there are still empty seats in the pavilion. That's just the way it works out. Plus, there are now people bidding from the backyard. You don't necessarily have to be in the pavilion, but there are always some empty seats. And when you watch sales at other places, Keeneland included, that's the case as well, but not Monday for the share and Flightline. I've never seen a pavilion like that. It was standing room only, and $4.6 million for that one. But it was not the only notable on the agenda going back to Monday. And I think that this November sale, is still going on. But Monday was kind of a highlight day. And I just wanted to pull up some of the results. Robin Sparkles went for $450,000. Robin Sparkles, you might remember the nice Bruce Brown trainee. We had Bruce on talking about Robin Sparkles a little bit up in Saratoga. And nice little New York bred runner with 9 wins and 18 starts, over $500,000 in earnings. Had one up at Saratoga, won this season, won the Caress up at Saratoga. Had run well at Saratoga in previous years, but a nice little New York bred stakes winner for, as I say, Bruce Brown trained, but went through the sales ring and got $450,000. I did not subsequently read, what might be the game plan, whether, off to the breeding shed for this one, or a little more racing. As I said, I didn't read any follow-up, but it'd be interesting to see what's in I would think probably breeding, but as I say, we'll have to wait and see how that works out. Also, on Monday, Juju's Map, you might remember that one. A reserve not attained. I'm always amazed with these reserve not attained, how you sit back and you own a horse and you look at that figure up on the board and say, nah, we're not taking that. Reserve not attained for Juju's Map, $1.9 million. And they said, no, not enough. Caravel was out. Caravel, who was the upset winner, the turf sprint, at a big price, and kind of, gave America the lone turf victory on the weekend. The Pennsylvania bred was taken out of the sale after that Breeders' Cup victory, and Caravel, going to be fun to watch. They're going to race this one next year and maybe head to Royal Ascot with Caravel. So we'll see how that all works out. American Apple, another reserve not attained. This one is a little more reasonable, though. American Apple, we talked about that one over the past few weeks because Anthony Mormino, our colleague, had picked this one at a big price. in that victory in New York in the Matron a few weeks ago, $97, I want to say. And then she looked good again this past weekend at an even bigger price. Coming around the turn and turning for home, she was in the lead in the Breeders' Cup, but could not hold on, got swallowed up a little bit in the stretch. But American Apple was in the ring this past Monday. Reserve not attained, 600,000. That's a little more reasonable. You have a stakes winner like that, and you put the horse through the ring, and you keep it and race it, and maybe you have some fun still. And at 600,000 isn't out of the question, or a good chunk of that, and then you move on to the next career and make up the rest. So I could see somebody maybe looking at that and thinking, we'll hold on to the horse rather than take the 600. Also going through the ring this past Monday, Midnight Bishu, $5.5 million. So a nice price there for a very talented horse. Those were Monday at Keeneland. Fasek, Tipton's Sunday sale, which I think they call Night of the Stars, something like that. And that was the case. Some of the prominent names that went through the ring last Sunday down in Kentucky at Fasek. Gamine, $7 million for Gamine. Yikes. Blue Stripe, the nice horse that Mike Welch touted in the Breeders' Cup Distaff and just got nipped at a big price. Blue Stripe attracted $4 million, and Campanelle, $5 million in the Sunday sale. So there are some of your prices from this past weekend down at Keeneland, both at the Fasek sale on Sunday and the Keeneland sale as well. Highlighted by Monday, that's where a lot of the big heavy hitters were. But as I say, I think the Keeneland November sale, I think still may be going on. I mean, book 6 down there. NTRA Thoroughbred poll that came out a couple of days after the Breeders' Cup. Kind of interesting. There was things getting juggled up here, except on top, as expected. No surprise. Unanimous number 1 selected for the NTRA Thoroughbred poll. Flightline gets all 36 of the number 1 votes. As again, no surprise there. Flightline was number 1, maintains at number 1. But moving up from number 6 to number 2, Malathat. That was a little bit of a surprise. Jumps over Olympiad, who moved up from number 5, runs second in the Classic, and moves up a couple of spots. Modern Games outside the top 10 last week at number 13. Modern Games with the victory in the Breeders' Cup moves up to number 4. Life is Good drops, but not significantly after trying the Classic and trying to maybe steal it from Flightline. Winds up dropping from number 2 to number 5. Cody's Wish. This was a huge move. Cody's Wish was sitting at number 27 last week, but with the victory of this past week in the Breeders' Cup, Cody's Wish moves up to number 6. Here's where the list got a little bit interesting. At number 7 and number 8, we had a little discussion yesterday with Tim Wilkin about how we thought the 3-year-old Eclipse might shake out. And first of all, Modern Games is sitting at number 4 on the list, but there's almost a consensus opinion that it's tough for a turf runner to get that 3-year-old championship. So the voting is going to be very interesting because on the pure record, Modern Games looks awfully good. Woodbine Mile and a Breeders' Cup race. But if it does come down to the dirt runners, sitting at number 7 is Epicenter. And again, this is the weekly NTRA poll, and this is the one that came out after the Breeders' Cup. Epicenter sits at number 7, dropped down from number 3 last week, and dropping from 7 to 8 is Taba. But as far as the number of votes, they got 96 versus 94. So they're as close as you can get as far as the NTRA poll voters. How that will translate to an Eclipse vote is hard to say, but currently they're right there, neck and neck. And again, if Taba would elect to try the Malibu at the end of the year, would that add to, Epicenter's done with the injury in the Breeders' Cup and had the surgery and now goes on to a stallion career. But Taba has the potential to maybe add another after, the Santa Anita Derby, the Pennsylvania Derby, and if you toss on the Malibu, would that be enough? Another big move on the list, Goodnight Olive with the win this past weekend, moves from 28 to number 9, and Nest moves down a little bit with a little bit of a disappointing effort in the distaff, moves from 4 to number 10. And just to kind of go through some of the others in here, at 11, Elite Power, Warlike Goddess is 12, Rebels Romance from the weekend, 13, Clariere, 14, Forte, 15. That's notable because a 2-year-old making the top 15, that's pretty good. But there's your current, and this may be the last list. I'm not sure whether they do another one, whether they continue or whether it winds up with the Breeders' Cup, but that's how things stand or stood a few days ago, a couple of days after the Breeders' Cup. And we're talking Eclipse Awards. We won't know that for another couple of months, but they don't fool around in Europe. They decide there's pretty much after their main season ends, British Champions Day and whatnot, and then they put the ballots in for the Cartier Award. Cartier Award was announced just the other day, and Baid was named the Cartier Horse of the Year for 2022. No surprise, 4 Group 1 wins, and he was kind of touted all year long as not just a really good horse 2022, but something very special overall. So was not, a shock that Baid named the Horse of the Year in Europe. Also had another note here that I found a little bit intriguing. Joel Rosario fined and suspended for his distaff ride on Clariere. Why? He had hit the horse one more time that is now permitted under the HISA rules. He was found to have hit the horse 7 times, which is 1 over the 6-strike rule that is now part of the HISA rules. And so he winds up with a $900 fine and a 1-day suspension. He's going to take that, Joel Rosario, on November 16th. The rules get a little more strict if you hit the horse 4 or more times over the limit. The jockey gets a higher fine, a bigger suspension, and the horse owner forfeits the purse earnings. Now, that was not the case here. The limit is 6, and from 6 to 10, you have the limited, the fine and the suspension. You get 10 or over 10, it becomes the potential for the owner to lose the purse money. So, but this was 1 strike over the limit. So Joel Rosario sits on the sidelines on November 16th and a $900 fine. Let me just hit on some of the other notes I have here. Do a little handicapping after the break, and as I say, a little bit later on, Bob Ehalt will join us. But speaking of sales and whatnot, Pizza Bianca was also in the Facing-Tipton sale on Sunday. Pizza Bianca, again, one of those reserve not attained. And this one, Pizza Bianca goes back into training to potentially race next year, potentially race this year, again, if a race comes up. But reserve not attained. They looked up at the board and they said $3.45 million, not enough. We're going to continue to race Pizza Bianca. So Bobby Flay, Christophe Clement, the horse back in training. And again, they're looking to race next year as a 4-year-old, but they could try something this year. Christophe Clement says, let's get her to a breeze and see where we're at. So they're going to go back and, put the horse back in training and potentially get a race this year. But Pizza Bianca will be back on track next year, certainly as a 4-year-old, after they said no to the $3.45 million. Belmont at the Big A handle was down a little more than the officials expected. The handle went down 16.2%. They were budgeting for a drop of between 10 and 15%. And it's a different product. You can brand this stuff any way you want, but it's racing at Aqueduct as opposed to racing at Belmont. and racing at Belmont may be a little more attractive to the betting public. So they were thinking, okay, the handle's going to be down a little bit, but it took a little more of a dip than they expected. But as Dave Grenig mentions in his article, between September and October, 10 inches of rain knocked 27 turf races to the main track, leaving 107 on the turf. That compares to Belmont last year, where there's 126 turf races. Only 16 were knocked off. 16 as compared to 27 off the turf last year, and 19 more turf race. And the turf races typically attract bigger fields and a little more handle. So I would think that justifiably is noted in the article as being something that, may hit. Again, they were looking for between 10 and 15%. It was 16.2. You would think the turf races could have made that 1.2% that was outside of their expectation. Irod Ortiz has set a new single-season jockey's earnings record, helped obviously by a great weekend at the Breeders' Cup. He has set the record currently, and obviously there's plenty of time left, 34,628,000 plus. That beat the old mark, which was his 34.6 versus 34.1 million. He's also won 74 stakes races and is just behind Garrett Gomez's single-year North American record of 76. So you would think with the better part of, a little more than a month and a half left, Irod Ortiz stands a pretty good chance of setting the new stakes record in North America. We'll keep our eyes on that. His agent, Steve Rushing, says plans to continue riding at Aqueduct for the next month, save for the final weekend of November out at Del Mar. He's going to be at Aqueduct for that December 3rd card that'll have the Cigar Mile and some other graded stakes, and then heads down to Florida. So we'll see how that plays out. And I also wanted to make one other note, because they mentioned it on one of the simulcasts, maybe Churchill, one of the simulcasts I was watching when I was in here doing OTB Live this week, mentioned Steve Asmussen is now knocking on the door of 10,000 wins. He sits with, and this was a day or two old, so it may even be a couple more than this, but 9,939 wins. So within, and as they say, probably had some winners yet, so within 60. And, given the fact that in August of 2021, a little over a year ago at Saratoga, he set the all-time winningest mark when he passed Dale Baird with that victory, notable victory up at Saratoga, where the family was all there. He had horses racing as normal for Steve Asmussen at tracks around the country, and by serendipity gets it done with a horse up at Saratoga. I subsequently had him on the show a few days after that, and that was a fun interview we did with Steve. But so that victory was 9,446. He's now at 99, so he's put, like 500 victories on the resume in a little over a year. So you think, boy, he's about 60 away. What are we looking, 2 months maybe? So that'll be notable. A thoroughbred, North American thoroughbred trainer passing the 10,000 career win mark. And as they say, you would have to think it's going to be kind of sooner rather than later. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, I'll do a little handicapping for this afternoon. And then a little bit later on, we'll be joined by our friend Bob Ehalt for a little more kind of a last pass by the Breeders' Cup, get some thoughts on last weekend, and what a really nice exclamation point it put on the 2020 season. Still some great racing to come, but as always, the Breeders' Cup is a real late season highlight, so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. All of that right after this. Stay tuned.
Capital OTB is now streaming live on Roku. The RTN Racing channel on Roku lets you watch OTB TV live through your Roku device or your Amazon Fire Stick, rather than being limited to computers and mobile devices, which means you can now watch OTB live wherever you are. Simply open Roku, Scroll to find the RTN channel, then click on OTB TV. OTB TV on Roku. Try it now.
No matter where in the world you are, the excitement of wagering on horse racing is just a click away. You'll get live streaming, past performances, race replays, our virtual tote board, analysis and selections from professional handicappers, a simple, safe, and secure wagering platform, and best of all, you get track prices. CapitalOTBBet.com. Bet any place, anytime at CapitalOTBBet.com. And be sure to download our new mobile app from the iTunes Store or Google Play.
Welcome back to Racing Across America on this Sunday morning. I'm Seth Merrow. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to take a look at the late pick 4 races from Aqueduct. Not putting a ticket together. It's early and, scratches aren't out yet, but we'll give you some ideas. And this is going to include some turf action. And I just checked. I always go to the Mark Hennig Twitter feed because he's always notable for having the information up. And he says at this point, all the turf races are on. So that's good news. And again, too early to get any scratches. But the late pick 4 at Aqueduct kicks off today with the Winter Memories. This is for 3-year-old fillies on the turf. In the 6th, I have at 5, 7, 3, and 2. I'm going to put Eminent Victor on top. Chad Brown, Michael Dubb and company coming out of a 3rd in the Sands Point. Throughout the career, the horse has been right there in virtually every race, save for maybe the Lake Placid. That was a little bit of a disappointment. But otherwise, we're looking at a couple of wins, a 2nd and 2 thirds in 6 career starts. And I just thought, looking at this particular field and what this horse tends to do, I think you can lean in this direction. And it's 5-2 on the morning line. I'm looking, I think that's the favorite. Yeah, I don't know if you want too short of a price. I'm putting this horse on top by a modest margin. Again, I think this horse matches up nicely with this field, but not a standout by any means. So we'll see where the odds shake out. I don't anticipate the betting public going wild on this horse. I won't be surprised if that favoritism holds up. If the betting public does start to jump on it, then certainly you can look for alternatives kicking off your pick 4. My Risky Affair goes out for Christophe Clement. Nice front end win last time. An Allowance Company, another horse that throughout the career has been right there in virtually all the starts. And that last start, lifetime best buyer number on the front end, which was kind of intriguing. Now the fractions weren't much. I don't know whether this horse is likely to be on the front end again, but I do think the horse is in good form right now and very playable. Salama in the 3rd spot, lightly raced runner for Chad Brown. This is Stephanie Seymour Brandt, Peter Brandt's wife. And this one, like My Risky Affair, may have just tossed in an effort last time that says she is just in very, very good form right now. 3 career starts, 2 wins, bookending, a little bit of a disappointing finish, but the win last time, again, lifetime best buyer, that was a jump up buyer-wise, but again, just might signal, 3 starts, light bulbs come on, could be very, very tough. Spirit and Glory, I think, for Rob Falcone, could be a player in here as well on a best effort. But I could point to 2 or 3 others. I talked to Terry Finley yesterday when we had him on, got a little thought on Parnack, and coming off the win last time, Terry thinks this one is kind of finally, getting acclimated to the North American racing, and coming off that last effort could be a player as well. But I have it in the 6th at Aqueduct, 5, 7, 3, and 2. 7th at Aqueduct, non-winners are 1 other than Allowance Event, 6, 3, 1, and 2 for me. I'm going to put Jane Gray on top. Only 1 win in 5 career starts, but 3 seconds and a 3rd. So it's been right there in all of the starts. Broke the maiden in the debut, and then it's just been fighting through this condition with good performances, but just can't break through. I'm going to give this one more shot, but again, when they start getting to the point where they just can't get the picture taken, you do get a little bit concerned. Where they're there, but they can't get over the hump. That is a little bit of a concern, but I'll give this one more shot. I think talented enough with this bunch. Rosa Veloce, claim 2 back, nice win off the claim in a state bred optional claim or non-winners of 2 other than. Class-wise, how is this horse going to stack up in this open non-winners of 1? That's the question mark. I think the horse is going to be okay here, though, and particularly off that last race. 3rd spot, Midtown Rose. Nice win last time, claimed out of that. Tried an optional claim or non-winners of 2 in the follow-up last time. Those were both down at Parks. Does have a little bit of early positional speed. Might be a little bit intriguing from the rail and a little bit intriguing at a price with the early speed. And I just thought this horse probably has to move up a little bit to get to the better efforts of the top 2 I've talked about. But if they don't fire a better effort, and I don't think they're consistently reliable to do that, then Midtown Rose becomes playable. Again, a little bit of a price. 7th at Aqueduct, 6-3, 1 and 2. 8th race. I believe this is the one of the 2 stakes that was supposed to be run yesterday. Originally, when like the early stakes calendar came out. Earlier this week, as they were drawing for races, they made the decision, the weather doesn't look good on Saturday, let's move this Artie Schiller to Sunday. And again, according to the Mark Hennig tweet, we are still on the turf. Good news there. And so the Artie Schiller for the 3-year-olds and up on the grass at a mile. I have it 1, 6, 8, and 9. Sifting Sands. This is a horse I've liked going back to last year. This was part of that crazy parlay that I had. The show parlay that I had, and Sifting Sands got the job done at 8-1, and all the horses paid a pretty good price for that show parlay. We turned our 100 into $2,900. So I'll put that one on top, not just because of that, but I do think this horse is a talented runner from Chad Brown. Hasn't been seen since early September, but the race just before that up at Saratoga was certainly one to kind of hang our hat on. And so Sifting Sands on top. Good governance in the 2nd spot. Nice 2nd place finish last time right here at Aqueduct for Chad Brown. Has this horse also in good form, you would imagine. And then Decorated Invader. Again, we talked to Terry Finley about this one yesterday. He was expecting this one to maybe also perform okay after having seemingly with a couple of starts rounded into some good form after having been on the sidelines for quite a while. This is a horse a couple of years ago. I mentioned to Terry, we were up at Woodbine in 2019 when Decorated Invader won the Summer Stakes, which was a lot of fun with the West Point folks. And that was, I believe, our last visit up north of the border. With the pandemic and whatnot, we haven't been back. Love to get back to Woodbine, but we were up there for that Summer Stakes and met with Tommy Bellhouse and some of the West Point folks, and it was fun to see them get it done in the summer. So Decorated Invader, been kind of a fan of for a while, been a nice performer for West Point, and I think is a player in here. Some like it. Hot Brown always has plenty of early speed, and I think that'll be the game plan again today. So we'll see how that plays out in the 8th at Aqueduct. 1, 6, 8, and 9 for me in the 8th at Aqueduct. And I've been handed a scratch sheet for Aqueduct according to Twitter, and it looks like some of mine are out of the mix. So we will readjust this afternoon when we come to OTB Live. 9th race at Aqueduct. I have it 6, 7, 1, and 8. I'm going to put Dancing with Rico on top. Class drop, I think, is going to be beneficial for this one. Callaloo in the 2nd spot. Dave Donk trainee making the first start. This looks like a field where you can go with a fresh face. And so with that, I'll take a shot with the son of Trinneberg, who, this is going back a few years, but Trinneberg was one of those that floated a little bit under the radar with first-time starters. The numbers weren't huge, but they were notable. And as they say, that was a few years ago, but interesting in a situation like this, maybe to reflect back on that. Third spot, Sinful Dancer, comes in decent form recently and right at about this level. So in the ninth at Aqueduct, 6, 7, 1, and 8. All right, we'll take a break. As promised earlier, we will be joined by our friend Bob Ehalt, who will, again, reflect a little bit on being down at Keeneland last weekend for a couple of really good days of Breeders' Cup action. So, again, we'll have one more shot of reflection on the big Friday and Saturday Breeders' Cup races and more. All of that coming up right after this. Stay tuned.
Come on.
I want sales reports on my desk by Monday.
Oops. My bad.
Love racing? RTN brings you every live simulcast on your home television, plus live video streaming and race replays on your PC and mobile devices. To order, visit rtn.tv. RTN, a breed apart.
Birdstone is an outside front. They're coming down to the finish. Can Smarty Jones hold on? Here comes Birdstone. Birdstone surges past. Birdstone wins the Belmont Stakes. But here comes High Chaparral. High Chaparral, the defending champ, to take it to Bob Rock. These two arch rivals head to head with Joe Hart bearing down on them. It's going to be a three-horse photo finish of the turn. Here's the wire. Photo finish.
Having trouble finding us? It's actually quite simple. Whether online or on your TV, it's never been easier to watch and wager on championship horse racing with Capital OTB. Simply log on to capitalotbbet.com. There you can watch our morning shows, live stream races, and wager on our state-of-the-art wagering platform. You can also watch from the comfort of your home on Spectrum Cable Channel 1250 or Fios Channel 467 and win more with Capital OTB. Welcome back to Racing Across America. As promised before the break, joined now by our friend Bob Ehalt. He also was at the Breeders' Cup. Bob, we talked to Tim yesterday, Tim Wilkin. We got a little of his reflection on the Breeders' Cup. He was writing for the Blood Horse. You were as well, so I thought we'd pull you in and get some of your thoughts. And let's just fire up here and say, Bob, good morning.
Oh, good morning, Seth. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, happy to have you on board. And I'll do what I did with Tim, and before we get to some specifics, just give some thoughts on the weekend in general. I was up here doing on Friday, I did my afternoon handicapping show, and we were watching the simulcast signal. Saturday, I was out in the front of the clubhouse with a big crowd out there. We had a big crowd on Friday, too, but watching the action on the TV there and just watching the simulcast signal, looked like a big crowd, an enthusiastic crowd. The weather turned out beautifully, and I said and have said all week long, it seems like a great exclamation point to the season and really a couple of great days of racing. Just an overview of the Friday and Saturday action.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I thought it was a really great experience for everybody. In Kentucky, look, that's horse country. I mean, you go to Keeneland, and my gosh, there's horse farms everywhere you turn. You go to the airport at Lexington, and as you're getting your baggage, there's these big little, I guess, placards on the floor promoting Justify and Coolmore stallions. I mean, you really know you're in the heart of horse country. And it was really some great racing. I mean, it was a good mix of favorites, some long shots, some horses. A horse like Caravel who won it like 42-1, and it was like after the race, you said, "How did you let this horse go at 42-1?" It's the Breeders' Cup, but you kind of at the moment when you got a bet, you kind of look past it. Afterwards, you say, "What did I do?" Some great performances. This staff was just a fabulous, exciting race, and certainly getting to see Flightline for what proved to be people as we all expected the last time. He delivered quite a performance. I mean, he's certainly the real deal. You could say people could say, and I understand he didn't race a lot, but boy, what we saw. Could you ask any more of the horse? When you average, I believe it's like over 11 lengths of victory. I mean, boy, there can't be any doubt that this horse was one of the best we've ever seen in quite a while, and certainly ranks with all of the all-time greats.
Yeah, we're going to pull up the stretch run here, and just love to get your reflections on what the place was like down there. As I was telling you while we were in the break, here at the Clubhouse Racebook, we had a jam-packed crowd, and people were going nuts. And after the race, people walked up to me and just were shaking their head, and what a horse. And we're watching him turn in the stretch here, and he just dispatches Life is Good. And I had Terry Finley on yesterday, and he said about this point, he's just watching that last quarter of a mile. I said to him, this had to feel great. You know you've done it, and you got one of the all-time greats. And I talked to Tim yesterday, as I said, Tim Wilkin, and he said the place seemed to kind of be in reverence of the horse as he came down the stretch and got it done. A 121 buyer figure. What were your reflections on that big race and the big stretch run from Flightline?
Well, I was watching from the gap where the horses come out on the track, and there was a big contingent of Flightline people. Will and Bill Parrish were there, their family and friends. The Engordos were there. It was Team Flightline Center, so it was a pretty wild scene around me, and that kind of made it hard to judge maybe how the stands were going. But as he opened up on Life is Good, I mean, look, one of the reasons why I have so much respect for Flightline is I have a lot of respect for Life is Good. I mean, in a lot of years, Life is Good would have been a horse of the year. Certainly when we watched him in the Pegasus, I said, here's your horse of the year. You had heard this talk about Flightline, but you said, come on, how's this horse going to eventually stretch out and beat this type of horse? You just didn't see it. So the fact that not only did he beat him, I mean, he just dusted him. Life is Good gave it his best shot. He went out there, he set a fast fraction. I mean, and then Flightline just said goodbye at the top of the stretch, and that was it, and nobody was coming. And you kind of thought, one of the scenarios you thought was that Life is Good would take a little bit of the starch out of Flightline, and maybe Life is Good wasn't going to win, but he might set it up for somebody. Well, even with that fraction, which turned out to be 109 and some change, that wasn't enough. And I thought it was a telling statement in the interview room after. Now, they had originally posted a 107 and 4 fraction because, what turned out to be was the outrider trying to help Epicenter, who was injured, tripped the timer. But when we were in the interview room, now I will say there was some, there was some disbelief. But I could tell you from being in the NYRA press box where we've had some fractions and it's just routinely laughed off and said, no, that's not right. With this one, we kind of thought there was an issue, but we didn't think it was beyond the realm of possible given those two horses. And I thought that was a telling statement. It
was the same thing. I was sitting in here watching the race, as I say in the race book, and that 107 came up, and I went, wow, 107. And my first thought wasn't it was wrong. My first thought was, this is incredible. But then it did make sense when they came out and adjusted it. But the 109 still just, that was incredible too. And again, nobody really made up ground. Olympiad came a little bit late. I was playing around with Epicenter, and unfortunately he winds up getting hurt. I would have loved to have seen him get a fair shot in there. But boy, it was just a phenomenal performance. And then we talked a little bit about it with Terry yesterday, the Monday sale of the share, $4.6 million. And you and I were talking before we came on the air today. And, it was just inevitable given the way the season played out. I had Terry on this summer, and at that point they were still talking about coming back next year in racing, and I think legitimately meant it, but just the economics played out against it. And as it turns out, I'm not sure, again, it's one of those the old adage on the racetrack, what's the horse have left to prove? But the economics just played against him coming back next year.
Yeah, I mean, look, people, if anybody wants to question it, the economics, from what I heard from everyone, even Lloyd's of London wouldn't give you more than $35 million of insurance on an active racehorse. So going into the Pacific Classic, like you had talked to Terry, and Terry had talked about, it wasn't his call because he only had 17% of the horse. But he felt there was a feeling amongst the people they would probably maybe want to come back to that 5-year-old season. When he won the Pacific Classic by 19 1/4, it just, with his breeding from Tapit, it pushed him into the stratosphere of a $60 million horse at a minimum. I heard there was one offer to buy him for $70 million. So that, just look at the exposure you're having. Can you really blame people for not wanting to take that risk? And look, the sad part of horse racing, we all know, these horses are very fragile. And you have to try to protect them. And I think when you weighed everything, it made sense. Plus, realistically, who would have run against him this year? I mean, if he shows up in the Pegasus, who's going to take him on? I mean, a couple of claimers? I mean, nobody's going to want to run against him. The Breeders' Cup Classic was the one shot to do it, where people thought maybe the Pacific Classic was a fluke, maybe he bounces. I don't think we would not have seen a competitive race. We might have seen some walkovers. I just don't think you really would have seen the kind of exciting racing where at least, we saw these horses run good races against him, because I saw the Thoroughgraph post-race numbers, and Olympiad ran his figure. He ran his figure. He got like a -1.5, and Flightline got a -6 after going a -8. Now again, the lower numbers are better on those scales, but those horses ran their race and they just couldn't beat them. And I say, we talk about Flightline. I talk about Life is Good being horse of the year. Well, in any other year too, in this particular year, probably Olympiad would have been horse of the year had he been able to win, had Flightline not been there, and he won the Classic, and he only had that one bad race in the Whitney. He probably would have been horse of the year, and he ran a legitimate race on his speed figures. So it just in the fantasy world, yes, it would have been great to keep seeing this horse have competition and give us some exciting races. But boy, he pretty much put away the competition, and the idea that somebody was going to compete with this horse, it wasn't going to happen unless something really happened to this horse.
Where do you come down in the social media world all week long has been debating all-time greatest? I asked Terry, and Terry had a great answer. He said, I'm not going to get into that debate. I'm just happy we have the horse, and if people want to put him up in that conversation, great. And I have been all week long kind of in a similar area where, first of all, Secretariat versus Flightline, I think in all of sports, and I mentioned, Bill Russell versus Michael Jordan. It's hard in any sport to compare from different eras. But I did appreciate the fact that the conversation this week brought out a lot of conversation on who were the greats, and reminded people of Spectacular Bid and, Secretariat, obviously, and those types. And it got me to go back and look at the lifetime PPs of my favorite horse, Forgo. So I just thought, overall, Yeah, let's just celebrate great horses, and the conversation this week allowed us to do that. But what are your thoughts on that topic?
Well, I did a piece for Blood Horse that came out yesterday with my own opinion, and I use my frame of reference races that I've seen and followed the sport, which go back to 1971. So I did see Secretariat, and it's still in my heart. Secretariat is the greatest that I've seen. A couple of reasons. We only saw Secretariat at 3, and later in the 70s, which was just a golden era for racing, we saw Affirmed at 3 could not beat Seattle Slew at 4. Spectacular Bid at 3 could not beat Affirmed at 4. And then at 4, Spectacular Bid was untouchable. Had we ever seen Secretariat at 4, I could only imagine what we would have seen. And here was a Triple Crown winner in the Marlboro Cup. He beat the best third horse that they could find. Yes, he had some losses, but he was also the champion turf horse. I mean, he beat the best turf horses in North America very easily. That, to me, is the kind of greatness that I haven't seen anyone match. Now, Flightline, his greatness was that he was just so dominant over these horses. And yes, I think when you get to something where who's the most valuable player, who's the most outstanding player, kind of how do you define greatness? I kind of look at it more in the terms of brilliance as opposed to longevity. And because of that's why I put a Flightline second, because as I say, in grade 1 races, he was averaging wins by 11 or more lengths. I mean, grade 1 races winning, and not just one, 4 of them. It's just things I don't know if we'll see it again, where, maybe you could dominate some bad horses. People could maybe say the Belmont Stakes wasn't a great field once Sham got hurt, but still the time. And when you see these speed figures from highly reliable services giving this horse great figures, I had heard, I mentioned in my story yesterday, the Thoroughgraph people said it was virtually the fastest classic ever, which goes back 39 years. The only one that was kind of similar to, and maybe a tick, a quarter of a point faster, was Vito Rosso when he won at Santa Anita. But in my mind, in terms of the brilliance, yeah, it was Secretariat, it was Flightline. If you want to talk about careers, yeah, that's where I think, when you talk into body of work for longevity, yes, you bring in Forgo, yes, you bring in Spectacular Bid and horses like that, but at least in terms of the best, I have him second.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. And as I say, just the conversation you just had, for a lot of folks who weren't around for Secretariat, I think that, reminiscing and bringing them into that conversation and equation has been a benefit to the game over the past week or so. So I appreciate all of it. Speaking of stars, potential stars, 2-year-olds are always fun to talk about this time of year. And yesterday with Tim Wilkin, we talked about Arabian Night, the $2.3 million purchase that won on the Breeders' Cup card on Saturday. But for Blood Horse, you wrote about a nice one on Friday that may be worth watching on the undercard. And speaking of Bob Ehalt runners, he had Arabian Lion in the 4th on Friday at Keeneland, and Arabian Lion went off as the big favorite, going to be the 9 horse as we look at the stretch run. But second-time starter number 2, Giant Mischief, is going to get it done for Bradcock's Spendthrift and Company. 3/4 of a length is the chart margin. 6-1 was the price. And as I say, you wrote about this performance. Giant Mischief, maybe a nice little 2-year-old we'll have to watch going forward into next season. Give us your impressions.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the race and the performance. I mean, I think they were about 17.5 lengths ahead of the 3rd horse, which kind of shows where they were. Again, now I meant the Thoroughgraph because they were kind enough to put out their post-race figures of all the horses on Friday and Saturday. When you look at the Thoroughgraph figure, that race that allowance race came up faster than the juvenile. Interestingly, again, because these speed figures take into account factors like ground loss. Giant Mischief ran a 2 in that race on the thoroughgraph, and again, lower numbers are better. I believe it was a 2 3/4 for Forte in winning the juvenile. So, there was something about this. And then the other part of it, the horse who was second because he had a wider trip, Arabian Lion, he got a 3/4 speed figure. Arabian, as I say, I think the other Arabian, the one who won the opening race on Saturday, the Baffert $2.4 million horse, got a 2 1/4, which is still faster than Forte of what they gave. Now, again, these are sprint races; they're not 2 turns, so you're going to see. I thought Giant Mischief really looked good, showed some determination. He made a big jump in numbers from his debut in Indianapolis, Horseshoe Indianapolis, which isn't that surprising. I'm sure the figures there to the track are not going that fast. We'll see how he stretches out. His Sam is a sprinter. I think definitely there's going to be a really good sprinter miler. We'll see about the 2 turns. He is from into Mischief, so that helps. The other one, Baffert horse, Arabian Lion, that's Justify pulled out of I believe, Distorted Humor mare. That really bodes well for that horse going 2 turns. And he's in the kind of hands where he's going to be a factor in the 3-year-old races. But yeah, I thought that was a really good, promising race with 2 potentially really good horses. And as I said, when you add in Arabian Night, I think you kind of see that, there's a lot of interest in the juvenile. Or Forte certainly is your legitimate favorite to win the Kentucky Derby. K-Rock will see. Baffert thinks he's a bit eager. He just uses up too much energy early, so if he can get him to relax and ration out his speed a little better, he could be a factor. In National Treasure, actually, I thought ran a pretty good race. It was 3rd for Baffert. I think there's the potential for him to move forward, which is what we have seen from Baffert, these horses who start getting good in November and December, and they really become factors in the spring. But, that's the great part of the entire weekend there, where, you had the, as much as they seem like, why is there an allowance race? Why is there a mates race on the Breeders' Cup card? We did get to see some pretty good horses. And like I say, Giant Mischief showed a lot of determination and ability in beating Arabian Lion. So as I say, I think those are 2 plus. The horses you said Deb was talking about Arabian Night and the Saturday opener. Those are at least 3 horses. Keep an eye on, because they're going to have a say in some of these stakes, I think, down the road.
Yeah, Giant Mischief by 3/4 of a length. Arabian Lion was 17 plus ahead of the 3rd place finisher, so they ran away from that field and justified the numbers. Bob, before we let you go, just want to touch on, because obviously based in New York, and most of your coverage is on New York racing as the year progresses, and the Breeders' Cup came out with a press release that they kind of said, hey, once Belmont gets the game together and does some renovations and they're ready to go, we're happy to get back to New York. So that for New York folks who are waiting for the Breeders' Cup to return, there was some good news maybe on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been the situation that we've known about for a while. I know I've written a few times. I was hopeful maybe 2027, that's going to be the year they could get the Breeders' Cup and bring it back. That's kind of when they're hoping to have this renovation at Belmont Park done and in the rearview mirror, so that they could have this facility with, as I say, you see right now Belmont with that tunnel that they built, all kind of dug up and repairing that. You're probably, I mean, I know they are determined they're going to be a Belmont Spring meet at Belmont Park. I think next fall you're probably going to be back at Aqueduct. So once they can start moving forward, I know even more, I think, than what the Breeders' Cup said, New York was probably happier. Kathy Hochul was reelected Naira was, because they feel she's very supportive of racing and she's going to push forward the bond issue that they kind of need to do the construction. It did go forward last year in the budget. They're hoping, they're very confident, hopeful it's going to go in this next budget, and then that really can let them get the wheels moving so that they have the financing to do all the things they're planning to do. So yeah, it's probably you're probably 3 to 4 years away from the construction ending, and then as the rotational comes, Breeders' Cup does not want to get into a situation where Naira has a delay.
Yeah.
So they'll probably say a year like 2027, I think, is a fair one to circle, and maybe hopefully a year or two earlier.
I'm looking forward to the Breeders' Cup returning to New York. It's been a long time, and New York, being as important as it is on the racing scene, deserves a spot in the rotation. Bob, as always, appreciate the visit and the thoughts going back to last weekend, which was just, as I say, a lot of fun. Exclamation point on the season. Still great racing to come, but we always look at the Breeders' Cup as that kind of high point of the end of the year, and it lived up to it this year. Great work by you, as always, in the Blood Horse. Find your work also at America's Best Racing and beyond. So, again, Bob, appreciate the conversation. We will talk again.
Thanks, Seth. Always a pleasure to talk with you and the folks up in the Albany area.
Appreciate it. Bob Ehalt, as I say, you can find his work at the Blood Horse, America's Best Racing, and beyond. I'm going to wrap it up because on my up-the-wall monitor, I can see they've kicked off the pregame show down at Aqueduct, so we'll send it to Andy and Anthony to get you set for the Sunday afternoon card at Aqueduct. I'll be back in a while with OTB Live, looking at the Sunday action for Aqueduct and Churchill. And I think I'm going to print up the PPs for Saratoga Harness. We usually do a little sulky work as well on a Sunday, so we'll throw that into the mix also for this Sunday afternoon. Seth Merrow for Racing Across America on a Sunday morning. Always a lot of fun. Appreciate your tuning in. And again, given the post times and whatnot, we will be back in about an hour or so to kick things off for an OTB Live on a Sunday afternoon. So we'll see you then.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.